Good afternoon and good evening. This is another really interesting Globinar from Global Chamber, and we really appreciate you dialing in today from wherever you are in the world. I know one of our members who was kind of the inspiration for this event is in Dallas, and they have an app that's the center of their business. Many of our members have an app either as that or as part of the success of their business. And I've seen over the last couple of years, mostly successes happen, and it's really exciting to see. But I've seen, and you probably have too, either in your business or with others, the cases where a company counts on creating an app and it doesn't work, and they spend time and money and it's a dud. And we don't like duds, and either does iTexico. And so we thought we'd ask them, really great experts at creating applications, to tell us more about how do you consistently create really innovative solutions for your customers and our members. We'd really like to hear more. So today we have Lance Vaughn, who's the Mobile Innovation Studio Director. There he is, who is calling in today from, I assume, perhaps from Austin, Texas?
That's right, Doug. Good morning.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about app innovation, more App-lause and more App-appreciation. Sorry for the bad puns, but I think the general consensus is that we all want to be as successful as we can as we grow internationally, and iTexico does a great job with that. Lance, you've had I think a pretty long career, in IT and in client services. You did your first coding in 1982. Congratulations.
That's right. Yes.
Your first web app in 1995. So most of us probably didn't even know what a web app was in 1995, and you already.
That's right.
You've worked on hundreds of products, and I love the way you put clients first in your whole approach, not just you, but the whole company. So we look forward to hearing more about how do we get more innovation putting apps together.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for having me. I look forward to sharing some of the lessons that I've learned over the years, and some of the processes and kind of worldview, if you will, that we have here at iTexico. So again, thanks for having me, and let me share my screen, and we'll jump right in.
Awesome.
Okay, Doug, if you'll let me know, I'm assuming that you can see that correctly.
Looks good.
All right, very good. All right, really quick, let me jump in and explain a little bit about iTexico to give you some context and introduce myself, if you don't mind. So we are a digital innovation firm, and we primarily focus on nearshore plus software development. So what that means is we've got 300 plus designers and developers down in Guadalajara, and a little bit north of there in Aguascalientes. We've got a number of folks here in the US, primarily the executive and leadership teams, as well as the sales and some strategic consulting as well. So this is a quick snapshot of our leadership team. There I am on the top row. Again, a great team. We just recently celebrated 8 years in business. There by the number 8 balloon, that's our two co-founders, Guillermo and Anurag. Guillermo, a Mexican citizen, and Anurag, a U.S. citizen. There's some of our quick logos. I like to do this because it'll give you some context of kind of the level of solutions that we've built, some of our successes, both historic as well as current. We tend to focus in the mid-size enterprise market, so anywhere between 10 million, to 250 million a year is our primary focus. So at iTexico, we help our clients elevate their approach to mobile in order to meet modern demands with a user-centered product approach. I think the key word there is modern. And so to set the context for this presentation today, let's talk a little bit about what modern demands really means, and then we're going to unfold over time how innovation can really help you reveal what modern demands are really impacting your business and the mobile space that you're playing in. So I think we all know that mobile has been around for a good number of years now, 10 to 12 years, if you will. And so what that means is that consumers are now much more digitally savvy than they were when most businesses launched a mobile app. Now we've got, I think, 2 million plus apps in the Apple App Store, 2 million plus apps in the Google Play Store. And so, if there is a need or a job to be done, which we'll talk about here in a bit, most likely there's an app out there to do that. And so it's a very competitive space, and our users are much more educated than they were 10, 12 years ago. And I'll suggest to you, keyword here, fickle, is that they're beginning or have begun now expect a significant more from you and from your app. And that's kind of what we're going to unpack to set the stage for how innovation will help you answer those demands. So mobile users are now swimming in this growing sea of data and devices and content and social media, while companies and brands, much like yourself, are all competing for their attention. So that's kind of setting the stage for where we are, who we are, and what we're going to be talking about today. So to the actual presentation here. So more applause and appreciation through innovation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce here a very iTexico branded view of the world and help you understand our approach to the presentation so that you can get an idea of how we're going to go about presenting this topic. Today's topic really is about innovation. I don't want to jump in just straight away and talking about innovation. I want to work towards it. And one of the reasons is because innovation, I think we all know and understand, is a very highly overused term. If you're not being innovative, are you innovating? How are you doing innovation? And there's a number of failures that have happened in the industry. There's some firms that have done innovation well. And I'm going to help you understand from iTexico's perspective, the right way to be innovating as it relates to your mobile app. And the clue here is this individual at the top of this pyramid, which is the user, the end user of your mobile application. And I believe that every organization in the world really could use this, what we call maturity model, to understand how well are you serving that end user and how well are you innovating. So you could potentially get a score all along this linear line here. So, does the app actually have good quality? Are you automating releases? Are you creating a delightful user experience? Are you actually running scientific experiments? And then how do all of those individual efforts and exercises within your corporation inform the innovation practices that you're doing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into 7 different problems that we've seen in the marketplace and provide to you the solutions to each of those problems. So problem number 7 is that you're not rugged. And this is not a term that we made up. You can go to ruggedsoftware.org if you want to know a little bit more about it. You can do that after the presentation. I'm going to tell you what I think is super important for you to understand, at least initially here. And the idea that an individual, a company, a culture, we can be rugged. And rugged just simply means that we believe with great power comes great responsibility. And we need to take quality as very, very important, because if your app is crashing intermittently or users are having to wait too long to see new improvements, then that can potentially be a problem. And the idea here is that even though your firm may want to innovate, the reason that this is the first problem that I'm introducing and the reason that it's here at the bottom of this pyramid is I don't believe, and iTexico doesn't believe, that you should necessarily be investing in innovation if your app is in the App Store and creating a really negative user experience. Potentially you're focusing on the wrong problem. So the solution to that problem is to be rugged, to concern yourself with quality. Rugged describes software development organizations. And if you have an app, you are a software development organization. You must have a culture of rapidly evolving your ability to create secure and reliable and maintainable software. Those are the three most important things, and there's many attributes that kind of feed into and inform each of those. Maintainable, as an example, if you have to ask your product team to do a quick change or improvement on your application, and it takes them literally weeks or months, then your app is clearly not very maintainable. So this is where keywords like DevOps and automation really come into play. DevOps, if you can imagine a Venn diagram between development and operations, DevOps is this cultural trend to give the development team more operational power, to break down those barriers between dev and operations. But why? It goes back to that diagram with the user on top. We want to be able to release new improvements, new features as quickly as possible. So it's all about getting these new features and improvements to the marketplace as quickly as possible. And a lot of times this gets kind of thrown into the bucket of automation. Automation is this idea of automating development and the deployment and delivery of those features. So my favorite metaphor, I guess, for anti-fragile, which is another term for rugged, is this idea. Imagine standing at the top of a staircase and you've got your product, this cardboard box full of contents, and you drop it down the staircase, and perhaps the first time you do it, it actually breaks as soon as it hits the floor. It doesn't even get down the staircase. So you pick it up, you fix whatever it broke, but then you do it in a way that it doesn't break again. And now you're starting to think about being anti-fragile or rugged. So then you drop it down the staircase again, it gets further down the stairs. Eventually you get to the point where you're able to drop this box all the way down the stairs repeatedly, and it's not breaking. And there's actually a trend in the industry. I think Netflix is the #1 most recognizable brand that is practicing anti-fragile or rugged practices. And they've literally created software that attacks their software in order to create software that is almost fail-safe or reliable. And the whole reason why is so that we can sit down when we want to watch a movie with our family, we can enjoy a movie and it doesn't break. They're creating a positive user experience, and they're doing it through caring about the quality of their engineering. So that's anti-fragile. So it's time to adopt anti-fragile practices. It's time to automate security and quality tests. Don't wait until the end of the year or once a quarter to look at your software and think about, are we being secure? Embed those security tests, those automated security tests, into your deployment pipeline, and start doing that today if you care about the quality experience of your users. So it's time to promote developer responsibility. This type of thing costs money, so it does require executive sponsorship. And so that's #7. I recommend you look into rugged. And if you do nothing else, just look at automation and how you can more quickly empower your developers to automate that release cycle to get features to the marketplace quickly. So that's #7. Along the way, I'm going to share a couple of books with you. I am always reading, I'm always learning. There's a book called The Phoenix Project here that is a novel about IT and DevOps and helping your business win. Highly recommend it. #6, you're not creating delight, right? So the problem here is when everyone ran to the marketplace 10, 12 years ago and created a mobile app, the user experience design was subpar. So your UI is generic, or it's slow, or it's cumbersome. And going back to this idea that there's so many options for our users today, if you're not truly generating delight, creating a wonderful user experience for your users, then they're likely going to be moving on or looking at other alternatives. So potentially it's time for you to reimagine your app. Leverage the power of user experience design. Make it as easy as possible for users to log in, to use your app, and generate delight. Be sticky. Be such an amazing experience that your users are going to share their experience with their friends and their family. So with regard to mobile, I think it's time to stop thinking about mobile as being the actual individual device. It's not about Apple or Google. It's not about hybrid, cross-platform versus native. It's time to reimagine that when we say we have a mobile app, what we're really doing is we're creating a mobile experience. These individuals have jobs to be done, and they're using the mobile device to do it. And so when we are talking about mobile, I would challenge you in your culture to start thinking about mobile as the user and not the device. This is my favorite image that suggests the difference between design and user experience. It's possible that 10 to 12 years ago you did spend some time thinking about the design of your app, but the user experience, the way that users want to or are actually using your app might in fact be different than the way that you intended them to use. And so you should always be continuously, monitoring your users. And this is clearly, an interesting problem that a city had, where they had an architect that built some beautiful layout for the park, but we users, we want to get to where we want to get. And so clearly the city, if they really cared, could come in here and maybe redesign this. So this is a great picture. So it kind of sets the stage for where we're headed. So problem number 5, I'm going to guess here that you're not being scientific. And this has become a very, very common trend to actually start promoting a scientific culture within your organization. And we do that not just because data is fun, but because data can truly help us actively learn about our users. It gives us visibility into their behavior. And it's similar to, right? It's similar to what we were just talking about. If we built this and forgot about it and never cared to come back and actually examine the way our users were experiencing our design, we wouldn't learn from this. And so then we wouldn't know what to do from it. It's time to start running experiments. It's time to start learning through experimentation. We talk about implementing instrumentation within our app. So it's something like, imagine Google Analytics, which you probably have on your website or within your web app. A lot of folks don't know that you can implement Google Analytics into your mobile app to do the same thing, to learn from how your users are using your app. And there are other options out there as well. Some of them are open source. Some of them are, tens of thousands of dollars off the shelf. So it's time to start looking at what you can afford. And even if you have no data scientists, find someone potentially within your organization that might be interested in running some experiments. Instrument your app, start leveraging these tools and start learning. And it could be within a year, maybe you've got a data science team. And so this gets to the topic of lean. And lean actually comes from the Toyota production system out of Japan. And we probably all heard of this idea of a lean startup. Lean is really about eliminating waste. You could be wasting time, wasting money, wasting resources. And so lean is this idea of building something and then instrumenting it so that you can measure activity and learning from it. And then you repeat as quickly as possible, and always always learning. And so I think you're going to start to hear now how you don't necessarily, in order to be innovative or in order to innovate, you don't necessarily have to use external innovation where you bring in a firm like iTexico to run some innovative exercises or innovation exercises. You could just begin kind of adopting an innovation culture. And you do that through leveraging things like running experiments. So let's keep this idea of lean in our mind. I know it's one of those buzzwords that maybe you haven't yet quite fully understood how it works or how it compares to agile. And so I'm hoping that through the process of this presentation, maybe some of that will become more clear and potentially maybe help you understand. But a quick just drive over the mobile landscape. It's important to understand that in the industry today, that mobile strategies are in fact changing rapidly. And that's why in 2018 at iTexico, we didn't launch a mobile practice, we had a mobile practice, but we relaunched it in a way, and it became our mobile innovation studio, because we want mobile clients who care about innovation and care about learning and continuous improvement. And I think that in order to be successful, you have to be doing these types of things. App owners, product owners must respond to the market demands of our more demanding, more educated, more savvy users and more fickle users, right? It's time to begin identifying and building the right features. And experimentation, in fact, allows you to stay in sync with this change that's happening in the marketplace. So, problem number 4, your app isn't useful. So you're not solving a real problem in the daily lives of your users. If your users are in fact only using your mobile app maybe once a month, once a week, not very often, then it's possible that you're not really solving a real problem for your users. And I think this problem is actually much more common than we'd like to think. So it's time to embrace design thinking. Again, another term that you may have heard, and but maybe not known exactly how it fits into what you should be doing on a daily basis. And design thinking goes back to identifying how can we solve real problems for users? How can we generate that delight, not just by creating a more beautiful app or an app that requires fewer taps to get the job done that I need to get done, but this idea that the stakeholders in our company, the highest paid person perhaps, isn't necessarily the right person to be making true design decisions for your app. And this is relatively new school, and it may not be a fit for your culture. There are ways to do innovation without really leveraging that term or embracing design thinking. But I'll tell you that design thinking truly is at the heart of thinking about your user as potentially being the most important person. And so we're going to talk about this idea of conducting regular design sprints. I'm a big fan of design sprints. I've got the book Sprint on my desk at all times. I've got a number of books here. I'll recommend this book here a little bit later. So design sprints, again, are something that you may have heard of, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's really all about interviewing your users and testing ideas. And that's really what is at the heart of design thinking. So this image is meant to kind of blow you away. Maybe you've seen it before. It's a lot. I don't expect you to completely understand it. I'm going to simplify this diagram for you, but it's a very common, very popular diagram. And I think it was because individuals like myself, like yourself perhaps, were trying to understand what's the relationship between design thinking and lean and agile. And here it is down here, right, across the bottom, this idea of really discovering the problem, how can we be more useful for our end users, right? How can we generate delight? This idea of ideating, and this is really, brainstorming, if you will, the old-fashioned brainstorming. And then this is where lean comes in, where you're doing build, measure, learn, build, measure, learn. And then this idea of agile, which most likely your development team is practicing today, where you're building, in 2 or 3 week sprints, you're building a small feature set and releasing it quickly through something like DevOps or automation. I wanted you to see this diagram. I do recognize it's a lot, but let's try to simplify it. And let's say really what you're doing here is you're discovering the problem, or let's maybe say a problem. Maybe you don't know what problem there is to solve yet. Go in and try to find a way that you can solve a problem for your end user and then develop that solution. And if you can do it right, this is really all about creating a competitive edge or a competitive advantage for you as a company or a product owner or an app owner. This is your way of disrupting the marketplace before you get disrupted. So we'll come back here. We'll talk a little bit more about this specific area. This is really where design sprints are. But I wanted you to see that image. So design sprints came from Google Ventures. This is their old logo, and this is their new logo that they just brought out, I think, in 2015. But I think we all recognize that Google Ventures is the arm of Google, or I think it's possibly even the arm of Alphabet now, I'm not really sure, that invests in startups. And part of the way that they discover which startups to invest in is to take them through a design sprint. So Google Ventures, it's a venture fund. They have over 2 billion under management. It's really pretty amazing. So they've invested in Uber, Nest, Slack, some of these companies that are just common, very well-known brands. And they would literally use design sprints, not just to decide what ventures to invest in, but to help these investments or ventures to solve a really hard problem that no one else is solving in order to really to secure their investment. It's to give that company or that startup a significant advantage in the marketplace so that they'll be successful, right? This is a quick snapshot of what a design sprint is. It's a 5-day exercise where we are bringing in some really smart people. Some of them will be at your company. And in fact, you could run a design sprint completely at your company. You don't necessarily need iTexico or someone like myself to come in, but this is a service that we provide. So you don't have to be design sprint experts to run a design sprint. You bring 4 or 5 individuals into a room. They really only have to be in the room Monday through Wednesday. But on Monday, we're going to kind of lay out the landscape of all of the different hard problems that are in your space, in your domain. We're going to select a problem and understand that problem. And then we're going to begin sketching out various ways to solve that problem through what I like to say is kind of the democratization of brainstorming. So we have this term that we call the hippo, the highest paid person in the organization, who could potentially walk into the brainstorming exercise and say, this is what you're going to work on. And then we all have to go back to our desks and work on that thing because they just made the decision for us. Well, that's a horrible way to get, the company excited about solving real problems or excited about coming to work. So through this process of diverging and then converging, and through the process of democratizing brainstorming, we're able to select the right solution to the problem that we want to solve. And then on Thursday, We prototype that. It does not involve code. We'll usually use Keynote or PowerPoint or some other tool to create a quick, beautiful, clickable prototype that we can then put in front of users on Friday and validate whether or not that solution actually works. Does it really solve a hard problem? Is it useful to them? The neat thing about this is, going back to the term lean, Toyota production system, eliminating waste. Why do we call it a lean startup? Because they do exercises like this that allow them to potentially fail fast, right? Identify if this is a bad idea, maybe we don't want to invest in it. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's keep going back to the drawing board until we find a solution to that problem that the users are going to love. So that's the idea of a design sprint. I just wanted to share a couple of quick examples about design sprints. There's some companies here that use design sprints to create an interactive diagnostic tool. Then one here that created a perfect new user or first user experience for a fitness app. Here's Blue Bottle Coffee, one of my favorites. They used sprints to expand their business into online sales. They had a retail store and they wanted to go global, right? And they used a design sprint to identify the right approach or solution to that problem. But potentially some of the more interesting ones didn't really have to do specifically with web or mobile UI. Here's Savvy Oak. They used design sprints to give their hotel delivery robot a personality. And so this robot would actually come to your room and answer some questions for you, etc. So it's all about, how do we create an amazing, unforgettable, delightful user experience? And then finally, Slack, who I think most of us probably know, they use sprints to overhaul their marketing. And so when we think about design sprints, it doesn't necessarily have to be user experience design, although it's commonly used for that. It really is about identifying a hard problem and solving that problem in a democratized way that's time boxed, so it's super efficient. You prototype it, you get it in front of the users, and you quickly discover whether or not you want to invest any more in that. And I would suggest to you that in 2019, that is innovation. Innovation doesn't have to be a $250,000 investment. It can be quick innovation culture exercises that you can run internally. You could bring in a company like iTexico to help you. So I highly recommend the book Sprint, How to Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 days. How am I doing on time, Doug? I forgot to start a timer. I think I've got about 10 more minutes or so, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Problem number 3. So, you're not innovating, right? Users don't want to download another app. Users will pursue the path of least resistance. We talked about this. And you're not testing new ideas. So it's time to start innovating. I'm not even going to, I will quickly share this experience with you. I just went through this a few months ago. I went to Park and I was in a super big hurry. I didn't want to download an app and I didn't want to have to get out of my car, but I saw this idea of texting a quick word or code to a number. And I had this quick, with my mobile phone, without downloading the app, I had this quick exchange and secured that transaction and was able to park, and I was out of there in like 3 minutes. And I guarantee you that company has thought through innovative ways to increase their traffic, right? And so that's a quick example that I love to share because I think we can all relate with it. Users are by default, we're not just savvy and fickle, but we're also lazy. Again, path of least resistance. Make it easy for me, please. So it's time to innovate. It's time to consider additional ways to engage your users outside of your app, as in my example before. And innovation is really about focus and scientific discipline versus raw creative thinking. So When I use the word brainstorming, you probably imagine, 10, 20 years ago, this idea of getting a whole bunch of people in the room and arguing. And then the hippo, right, the highest paid person, will just solve the arguments by telling you what you're going to work on. So gone are those days. And now there's a new way to go about it. And that is the design sprints. I really want to share with you a quick story about Lego. And I love this story because what I think it really does, at least for me, is it really exemplifies or demonstrates how you can innovate yourself. You can innovate the wrong way or in the wrong area. And so innovation is not easy to get right. And that's one of the reasons why I love design sprints is, let's say you did get it horribly wrong. Well, it was just a week-long investment, and then you learn from it and you move on. And you're welcome to Google on this. There are 10 types of innovation. And I'm not necessarily going to step you through all of this because I know it's a little bit kind of abstract or heady, but I wanted you to understand that down at the bottom of this slide, I've really brought out the two things that are really specific focused to products, to mobile apps. Let's innovate on ways that we can improve performance. Let's innovate ways on how we can improve the product system, how we can create complementary products and services. So hold that the idea into your head. Then there's 7 truths of innovation. These are really, really interesting. Everything from like what Lego has done to fostering open innovation. But down at the bottom, again, these are 2 that are very product centric. Be customer driven, be user driven, right? And build an innovation culture. I believe that this is really where it's at. And so what Lego would tell you, I'm going to go back one slide, pick one type of innovation where you want to innovate and pick the truth of innovation and go in with that mentality and innovate in a very focused and disciplined way and be scientific in order to learn from it and quickly iterate and move on. The reason is because Lego, back, I think it was about in the early 2000s, they nearly innovated themselves into bankruptcy. And if you want to Google that or get the book I'm about to recommend, it's a super interesting story because I think the event or the trigger, Doug, was the fact that they had lost their patent for these plastic Lego bricks because a patent in the US lasts, I think, 50 years or something. And so they realized they're really going to have to try to do something super interesting and innovative in order to stay at the head of the market. And they did a lot of things wrong. And they did seriously, it's a private company, but they seriously considered bankruptcy because they innovated too much, too many ways, and too fast. So the way that we like to think about iTexico in the product space, in the mobile space, is to simplify it as much as possible. It's not just innovating your company or your financial model or your partnerships. Stay focused on the product. Stay focused on innovating how you can solve difficult problems to solve for your user, who is your most important person here, and stay focused in that area and keep an innovation culture at your company. So again, here's the book that I highly recommend, Brick by Brick: How Lego Rewrote the Rules of Innovation and Conquered the Global Toy Industry. You can tell what movie I watched this weekend. So, and one thing I want you to keep in mind, if we go back to that diagram, discovering a problem and developing the solution, I know that the word innovation is overused. I recommend using the term discovery. That's what we do here at iTexico. What are we doing? Are we doing discovery or are we doing development? And all of the activities that we do at iTexico can really be broken down into those 2 different areas. All right, and then going back to this diagram, I think we've talked about this diagram possibly enough here, but this is where we're discovering the problem here on the left, and developing the solution on the right. So here's the simplified version of that diagram, right? Identify opportunities, solve hard problems, and build better products. Here's a great website to visit if you're really interested in doing continuous discovery. Discovery should be done continuously. Innovation or discovery should not be a one-time thing. So check out Teresa Torres at producttalk.org. And then I do have a chat coming in, but I can't quite find where it is. So I will just...
Yeah, just push forward, no worries.
All right, okay, good. I appreciate that, thank you. So let's go back here, and yeah, I'm only about 5 minutes away here, Doug. So the problem number two that we've found, that I find at most organization is that it goes back to the innovation culture. Your team, your stakeholders, your culture is prohibiting investment into innovation, into discovery, or what traditionally used to be called research and development, right? You're not investing. There's a divide between design and dev teams. So this obviously, and you know what's interesting about this, Doug, is that it could even, maybe it's not your team, right? Maybe it's you, right? We need to, as an organization, to really be focused on having an innovation culture. And if it's you who might not be deep into that idea, I highly encourage you to do some more research, because if you truly do want to get a competitive edge, a competitive advantage in your industry, you need to be looking at things like design thinking, things like product thinking. So this product thinking really is this idea where product is the most important thing, because it is what the user is interfacing with. It is what is providing a brand experience. It's what's providing that experience for the user. So the idea of product thinking is to restructure everything that you do as an organization around your product, and hire seasoned product managers. If you don't have product managers, I highly recommend that you get one. It's not the same as a project manager. Product managers are super important because they have to be able to talk to the executives. They have to be able to understand design, understand the tech, and understand your users. It's a lot of responsibility, and they're super critical. So experiment, test, fail, iterate, rinse and repeat. That is product thinking. So the general gist here is product thinking risks are tackled up front. And it's about solving hard problems, not necessarily just implementing features. So, and finally, it's about building the right product, right? Identify which features to build next, and build them and release them quickly without a lot of fuss. My favorite book also here on my desk is Inspired by Marty Kagan, How to Create Tech Products that Customers Love. Highly recommend that. So, and then finally, problem number one. Your app isn't human enough. And so this is kind of forward thinking, forward looking, but just follow me on this. This is an interesting way. This is where I see a lot of companies really innovating a lot right now, because it's too difficult for users to do the job that they need to do. And it's time for technology to bend to our human needs. So humanize your app. Invest in problem discovery. Artificial intelligence is already making a real impact on our lives, and tech is continuing to evolve at an ever-increasing pace. Smartphones are speaking and listening and understanding, meaning having contextual understanding. So it's time to potentially start exploring this area. How can we speak to our phones? How can we leverage something like AirPods to not just talk to our phones, but talk to our apps, and to have a user experience that way? And leverage emerging tech in order to create delights in your users. So I mentioned many times this idea of jobs to be done. The job for a mobile app is to be personal and useful, while helping users with their jobs to be done. to help them be more productive. And there's a book called Jobs to Be Done. It breaks down jobs into into functional space and to a personal space. Really super interesting book. And at the end of the day, that's what our users are doing, is they're doing a job on their mobile phone. And it's important to kind of take that perspective as we go about trying to solve problems. So recommend this book by Stephen Wonker, Jobs to Be Done, a roadmap for customer-centered innovation. So that's pretty much it. Again, Director of Mobile Innovation Studios here at iTexico. I believe it's time to elevate your approach. We do have a services framework. You'll be interested, I think, or intrigued anyway, that we have it broken down into discovery and development and then ongoing care programs. And in fact, we have an assessment. I'd highly encourage you to reach out to me, reach out to iTexico. I'm happy to come in and do a quick maturity assessment to see where you are on this continuum, and help you get to the point where you're innovating more effectively. So, and with that, thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Doug.
Great. Thank you, Lance. We now have time for questions, and we do have several questions in already. So if you have anything additional, please ask them. We have about 10 to 15 minutes left. One of the things I would suggest we do is after this, when we post a blog post on this, we'll share all of the books that you listed, Lance. And so I wrote down, I think, hopefully most of them, but definitely let's get those in. Also, we'll have your presentation available to anybody, I think, that is interested, right?
Fabulous. Yep.
And then we've got the 7 different points that you covered. In terms of people that you work with, let's skip to today rather than the last several years. But when somebody comes in and speaks with you today, what are the common success factors that you see when they walk in terms of how they approach describing it to you, how they approach kind of the next steps? What are things that you are really encouraged by when you first speak with somebody?
Well, yeah. So it would go back to this idea of being committed to or dedicated to product excellence. And I talk about product excellence all the time, which is where the quality of the product is important, recognizing that everything that we're doing is creating a user experience that is somewhere on a scale of 1 to 10, and hopefully closer to 10, and that they care, right? To me, the most disheartening thing is talking with a product owner that either doesn't care or doesn't know how pleased or happy their users are, how successful their product is. And so it's almost more of a mindset, right? So the most successful product owners, I think, will be practicing a lot of the things that I just espoused in my presentation.
Okay. On the reverse side, what are some of the things that when somebody starts talking to you about their idea and their thought, or warning signs, things that you need to be maybe steer them away from, and basically you now have to worry about making sure they stay on the right path?
Yeah. So it would be where they say, I have an idea and I want to build an app, and they're not interested in testing the idea first, which tells me that they're more interested in being able to tell their friends, see that app on your phone? That's mine. I did that, right? And so it's almost more of an ego play instead of doing the academic thing, following a process to validate, is there really an opportunity there? And I'm shocked, honestly, at the low number of people who want to validate the opportunity before they just want an app in the App Store.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. We have a question in from Querétaro, and I'm not exactly sure what they're asking, but it seems to be asking relative to product versus service company, and are there differences in approach when thinking about a mobile application? They're consultants, they're a service company, and they need to focus in on innovation. And I presume what they're asking is, are there certain things maybe that they need to be thinking about given that as they're approaching an application?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. There's really no secret here. At the end of the day, kind of where the rubber hits the road is there's got to be software on this thing that most people have in their pocket or in their hand or in their purse. Got a job that I've got to do. If your app is going to help them, it's going to create delight, and it's going to be a successful experience. Your product, or the product, I'll just say the product, no ownership here, the product will be successful because it helped in that engagement. Now, there's the product owner who's most likely a brand or a company or a business who owns that product. They don't need a services company to do all of the things that I pitched today that I believe wholeheartedly that they need to be doing. Now where a services company comes in is if a product owner, if a brand, I'll just say, a brand or a company, product owner, does not have the ability or the confidence maybe, or the know-how to do the types of things that I pitched today, that's where a services company can come into play. And that's where I've found myself. I got to tell you, I love my job. I love design sprints. I love helping companies solve hard problems. And I didn't really intend to end up here, but for a services company, I think you have to ask yourself, how can I help product owners out in the space do the types of things that I just pitched are super important? And a services company could potentially, going back to that pyramid, kind of the pyramid, you could focus just on the bottom rung, on quality. And there's a number of services companies that do this. They'll come in and help product owners implement DevOps standards and DevOps practices and automate there. There's a number of companies that just do design, user experience design, right? But really, as a product owner, you've got to be doing all of those elements super well. And sometimes you might need a services company to help you do that.
Okay. So those of you who asked that question, okay, excellent presentation. So it sounds like you might have nailed that one. So if there's any additional follow-up from the person who's asking, please let us know. I presume this is another question. You mentioned Google Ventures, and so the presumption there is that they're one of the best, if not the best, at the kind of design approach that you talked about. Are there others that we can point to that say, hey, these are some of the best out there that we'd want to emulate, and is that even worthwhile?
Yeah, I would say it's worthwhile. There's a name of a firm, and I'm unfortunately kind of blanking on them right now. There's a name of a firm out, I think, in the Northeast US, where they do nothing but design sprints. And I believe there's also one here in Austin. So this is obviously it's a up and coming trend. People are recognizing that these are kind of like bite-sized ways to do innovation. There's in fact a company, I don't know if I should name them or not. They're not a services company, but they're a product company, and they're here in Austin. And I heard through the grapevine that they're running a design sprint every week. And so what that tells me is they've truly, the CEO all the way up at the top, recognizes the importance and the value of innovation or discovery, and they're using design sprints as kind of that gear or that process or formula to follow on a weekly basis. So I can't really tell you who does it the best. I have heard that this company that in Austin that is doing it internally on a weekly basis, that they sometimes will do it by the book, and sometimes they'll kind of run off and do their own types of exercises. And the great thing about design sprints is it's a little bit of an open formula. As long as you're kind of sticking to the agenda, you could use different methodologies to identify a problem or different methodologies to test a solution, as an example. So I hope that helps. I mean, you're welcome, of course, to search the web. If you're anywhere in the U.S., I highly recommend iTexico for design sprints. Most likely, I would be there. Our head of design down in Guadalajara would most likely be there as well.
Okay, a couple more questions at least, and we've just got a couple more minutes, so we do have probably time for one or two more questions. You bring up the issue of your development team not necessarily being with the lead team that's developing the app, or in your case where you're actually working with another organization, and then the user is somewhere else, right? You've got distance between all of these elements. And so one of the things those of us here in the Western United States, I think, are more familiar with is the nearshoring concept, where the development team is in another country, whether it's, in the case of nearshoring, Mexico, or many of us have worked with India and Ukraine and other countries where the distance is large, and it creates different elements, not necessarily positive in the interaction between the team. How do you overcome that? How do you make that less of an issue than it can be?
Well, I mean, so one of the value propositions of iTexico is not just Mexico, but Guadalajara, which is, a couple of hours flight away from most major metropolitan cities in the U.S. And we always highly encourage our clients to go down and spend, a few days, a month down in Guadalajara or Aguascalientes, one of our delivery centers. And our team members are always up here in the Austin area or traveling to the U.S. So I think that's one thing, is a tighter, closer collaboration, being able to look folks in the eye, shake their hand frequently and on a regular basis. I also think the Mexico culture is much more similar to the U.S. culture than comparing it to something that's offshore. I guess the most important, maybe obvious thing, but I want to point it out, is that their working hours in Mexico are the same working hours that we have here in the U.S. And there's some flexibility as well there if you're West Coast or East Coast. But that's the traditional kind of value prop for nearshore. It's a cultural thing. It's their capability. Mexico engineers are extremely good. And the designers are perhaps some of the best in the world. But it's that quick plane ride. It's the working during our hours and being in the same time zone. But we've discovered that those types of aspects are really the major value prop of nearshore. Now, what we've done quickly, Doug, what we've done at iTexico and what we're still doing and will continue to do is having an innovation culture within iTexico, right? And this is where it gets super important, that we're eating our own dog food. We all recognize, what design thinking means, what product thinking means, what are design sprints, what are the goals of design sprints, who can contribute and who can facilitate design sprints, and then running those design sprints internally as well, so that we're always improving.
Okay, this relates to another question that we have from an anonymous attendee. We don't have the person where they're located.
Sure.
How do you bring the product culture to an organization that is too focused on the process and at the top of the marketing funnel in terms of being aware of the actual user needs?
Yeah, I mean, what a great question. At the top of the marketing funnel, I'm not entirely sure I know what that means. But I've got another presentation that I like to give. It explores the difference between a project manager and a product manager, and it really is a cultural thing. A project obviously has a defined beginning and end and deliverable, and a project culture is, we're going to do this thing and then we're done, right? At the heart of product thinking, at the heart of product mentality, is this idea that we've got a product in the marketplace. We've got a product in the store. Our apps are experiencing it today. They're either having a negative experience or a positive experience. We should align all of the resources that are needed to continuously improve that product and release new features on a regular basis because we care what they think about us. And we care about solving hard problems for them to create delight. And that it has to be on a continuous basis. It can't just be a one-time thing. And that's what a project is. It's a one-time thing. I'm going to paint that fence white and then I'm done for 10 years. Right. So yeah, I don't know how, Doug, I'm sorry, but this book, read this book and go from there. I'll tell you, I worked with a client a couple of weeks ago, Doug. I think you'll love this story. The CEO, I cannot name the name of the company, of course, but the CEO read the book Good to Great, which I did not recommend today, but I do recommend. He read the book Good to Great, multi-million-dollar company, and he fired more than half of his company and brought in a lot of younger folks who had the right mentality to take his company, to the next level for the next 10, 20 years. And he made that decision. Now, is the person asking me the question, do they have the authority to do that? Maybe not. But start a book club. Start asking if there are people within your company that want to read a book with you, and just start talking about it, right? And also keep in mind that, if you're super stoked about products, which I have always been, I went out and I found a company to work with that understands product and that sees the world the way that I do, because it makes my job more fun to do what I love to do. So maybe that's the right situation for you.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I think whether it was the Japanese automotive industry being revised by Dr. Deming and the Toyota production system, what it has to do with what we're talking about here is the continuous process, right? It's not just you develop a new car in 1973 and you're done, right? It's a continuous process in the automotive industry. It's a continuous process for apps, and whether it's 1 week or every 3 weeks, you've got the continual cycle that's so critically important. So thank you so much for all of this great knowledge. We will be posting a blog on this and the wrap up of this. If you didn't get your question answered, please send that to info@globalchamber.org or just contact any of us and we'll be able to help you. Our next presentation is actually next week. It's a holiday in the US in a couple days, the 4th of July. And so next week, our next Globinar is Tuesday, a week from today, and that's with Thunderbird School of Global Management. And so it's going to actually be at Thunderbird, their headquarters, and it's going to be about China, and it's going to be about China trade issues regarding tariffs and the trade war, and that this is the beginning, just the beginning of a long stretch of time where we're going to be living in a world with all sorts of potential conflicts, probably real conflicts on the trade side of things. And so join us next Tuesday. It'll be just as good as what you heard today. We really appreciate you attending today, and we wish you a great rest of the day. Thanks again, Lance, for some great information.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.